Welcome to another Fireside chat. Today we're going to be going over
principle number 4.
4.
Don't fear, don't fret.
I think this was going to be an interesting one to talk about because like all the first 3 were that like block of principles that like really were more one conglomerate. Now we have don't fear, don't fret. I feel like it is in some ways the logical next step because now you've done like this work on yourself, you've done this goal setting, and there's something you like to say, like if the goal doesn't make you a little nervous, it's not big enough.
It's not big enough, exactly.
So that's where, this kind of comes into play, yeah?
I think this one is more the transition one. I think without this principle, and again, as I mentioned earlier in another interview, that I struggled when I was putting these principles together, again, because they're so not linear. Where did this one come in, right? And this one was just the most logical transition. I feel that once I learned, this was a hard one also, by the way, but once I learned how to stop caring about what other people had to say, or by stop, listening to my internal voices and just overcome that fear. Once I learned how to do that, that was my transition point. So I felt that in my personal life, I felt that learning how to overcome the fear is a mental exercise as well as a physical exercise.
Okay, how physical? Because like I think of fear as like, it has physical manifestations in our body. Like if we're afraid of something, we maybe shake or tremor. But like how is it physical to overcome like this type of fear where you're really overcoming your fear of self or of others or of like, those voices that tell you it's impossible or whatever. How is that also a physical side?
So let's just give a very good example, right? We hear a lot that one of the greatest fears in a person's life is death, right? The second greatest fear is public speaking. Many people have a problem with speaking in front of a lot of people.
That I like.
Okay? And so, you hear this a lot, people standing in front of a stage, there's thousands of people in front of them. People sweat and people, lose their way of thinking or whatever. They're afraid.
Nervous.
Okay? Yeah.
But my question is, how is that overcoming it?
So here's how it does it. When I get on a stage, the very first thing I tell myself in my brain, this is not about me. This is about everybody else. I'm just a conduit, or I'm just a messenger for this particular message or this particular thing that I'm here to share. And so I'm going to bring that value, and I'm going to be the most valuable.
Like a water pitcher is full of water, but the pitcher is only good if it's full. And then is it filling up 1 or 2 cups, or is it filling a whole party full of cups? That's kind of, you're just that pitcher holding the water and like,
right.
Not dispensing it, but like
giving it out.
Giving it out.
And so that's how it ties in. So for example, when I went to all these, events and meetings and putting myself out there, and there's a lot of fear that's involved with what happens if I fail, what happens if I, whatever.
Like what happens if nobody shows up?
What happens if nobody shows up?
It's like the flip of the coin. It's like, what happens if nobody shows up? What happens if a lot of people show up?
Yeah, and there's all these, exactly, there's all these crazy, things that happen at the same time. So I have to physically, first of all, in my mind, tell myself and shut down this overthinking, this, and take action. This is how they're both, take action and say, listen, this is one of the steps of achieving these goals or these, whatever it is. And so I make a difference, and I would love to hear what other people have to say about it, and I'd love to hear what you say. What's the difference between fearing and fretting? Don't fear, don't fret, right? What's the difference between the two?
I think for me, the difference would be like fear is more of like a big worry. Like there is this specific thing is happening, and I'm afraid of it, or I'm afraid of what's going to happen, or I'm afraid of how I'm going to react. Those are like where I think fretting is more like those worrying, like those things that keep you up at night, that sit on your mind. You go, oh man, this thing and that. Just like, I think that to me the difference is like a fear is more of like that fight or flight. In the moment, I have fear, or I am afraid of something.
that pain in the heart or the chest.
That
or,
like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know, that kind of fear. Yeah. Whereas fretting is like, that's the thing that wears you down. It makes it exhausts you. And like,
that works on your brain the whole time.
You go to sleep and you think about it. When you wake up, you're thinking about it. When you're like, every time you have that little space in the day, oh man, I think a lot of people can relate to, especially if you're early in a business. It's like, okay, well, how are we going to make that bill? How are we going to pay for this person? Yeah. How are we going to afford this? How are we going to do that? Like, because things aren't always, it's not like 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. You have the predictable paycheck. Some months are going to be bigger and some months are going to be smaller. And like learning how to live within that is a tool of an entrepreneur.
For sure.
It's definitely something that's different than, if you want to say, most people's situations. If you're just a 9 to 5er, you know that at the end of the month or twice a month, you will get a check for XYZ amount. If you are one of those more freelance people, well, if I got 5 jobs this month, I'm going to get this check, but next month, if I only got signed on 2 clients, it's going to look different. Check, like, you know, that I feel is more that fretting. Like, you fret about this, you like kind of sweat the small stuff a little bit. Like, if they could still be big impacting your life. Excuse me, but it's how you worry about it.
Mm-hmm. I think, and that's exactly it. Fearing and fretting shows up in almost every area of our life, even if we're an employee 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. You know, I was an employee 9 to 5 for almost a decade, and I still had that fear, and I still had that fretting, and I still had all these things, and it shows up everywhere. And it's exactly that. There's that internal part or the mental part of it. So I'm afraid of trying something new because I don't know, whatever.
Because I've never done it before, so I don't know what to be afraid of. It's always that new thing. You're like, hold on, I'm so afraid of it. And then you start doing it like, well, why was I afraid? Like, that was easy, but you had never done it before, so you don't even know what to expect. Yeah,
exactly. And fretting is that obsession. It's when I become obsessed with that fear. Mm-hmm. It's when I'm thinking, and then
it's fear also drives you, I think.
And also, here's the other thing: is where I'm not even willing, because of fear, I'm not even willing to try something new. I'm not even willing to accept, you know, something happening, right? So, for example, something that we're going through right now with the whole publishing of the book.
Oh, yeah.
We could have easily feared and we could have easily fretted, you know, on both sides.
It's like, I think fear is that initial reaction of like, what are we going to do? Oh my goodness, the book. Mm-hmm. Like, we're supposed to be released.
Yeah.
It's already supposed to have been released. Like, what are we going to do? And then the fretting could be, did we talk to this person? Have we figured out this publishing? Have we looked at this?
And then why should I even speak to that person? How are they going to benefit me? And why should I even show up to that event? And why would that ever benefit me? Here's a great example.
The fear of like, what are people going to think of us? That here we said this was happening and then it didn't happen.
Yeah,
like that could also play into those fears. Like, you know, when something's beyond our control, we still kind of have that voice that tells us we're somehow in control. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, exactly that.
We because we've, you know, when you put yourself out there, you're like, what are people going to think?
Yeah, and I'll share a very quick story how, you know, and this also played into how we met, but that they're gonna have to read in the book. Something that's not written in the book is a story when I got stuck once in a certain part of LA. And there was no way for me to get back home on time. It was a whole story. We don't travel on the weekends and stuff like that. I was going to have to spend the weekend in Malibu. And I was very, very distraught.
I would like that.
It was really annoying for not being able to get home on time. But hey, getting stuck in Malibu is actually not the worst thing in the world. You know, you're right on the beach and all that. It was really nice. Long story short, I end up meeting a producer. You know, a music producer. I met him, and there was a whole story how that eventually led to me meeting, you know, some really, really important figures in the business world, and you know, in the production world, and all these kind of things. People that most of us, you know, perhaps not so connected people would have almost impossible ways of ever meeting these people. Well, I got that chance. And one of the main reasons why I had that opportunity come and pretty much fall on my lap, or some people could say luck.
Like, what a coincidence.
You know, or what a coincidence. It wasn't coincidence at all. I wasn't afraid and I didn't fear. I didn't fret. I went and I spoke to the person. Turns out the person happens to be a producer, Turns out the person is, retiring. Turns out he's looking to sell his, his rights. Turns out he wants a certain, multi-billionaire person. Turns out whatever,
all the connections,
the roll of events.
So I think really
turns
what
out
you're
that
saying,
way. But if it wasn't for that fear.
Right. So basically what you're saying, I think, is like almost like don't fear, don't fret, is like really like the exact opposite of that is what you need to be. Like if you're not fearing and not fretting, what does that mean you are doing?
Right.
So like
taking the steps.
If I don't fear and I don't fret, that means that I need to flip the situation around and, see it for the good or find the good in it. That idea of like every situation has a silver lining,
right?
A bit. And sometimes you have to search harder for it than others. But if I just react and respond in fear, and I just sit and worry about it, and I just sit and like make up all these stories, because that's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened yet.
Yeah.
You're just creating a whole. In Hebrew, I mean, like in English, in Hebrew there's a saying, but in English it basically means like you're living in a movie.
Yeah.
And like you're literally creating a whole storyline for yourself of like things that have happened. But you're worried about it because like it feels real because you've worked through the scenario in your mind and you've given it life that it doesn't have.
Right.
So the flip of it is, I think, like what to do if you're not fearing and not fretting. That's a good thing to not do. But then the to do is to find the good in the situation, find a way to flip it. And I think though that not always do you see it in the situation. Sometimes it takes a week later. Sometimes it takes a month later. Sometimes it takes a year later. Think about with you and me meeting, would it have ever happened? There was one checkbox on a form that literally kicked you out to go to Israel. And had that one checkbox not been overlooked and not filled out properly, we would have never met. Now, if you would have just sat the whole time in Israel, I can't believe I'm here, and I can't believe my life had to get upset, and I can't believe I had to change all my plans last minute.
Victim mode.
And it's a victim mode. Don't fear, don't fret. It basically says don't be a victim.
That's it. Exactly that.
Don't be a victim, because if you would have sat there, you could have sat in Israel we were there for
at the end it was 4 months.
6 months.
It was 4 months, and it was supposed to be 8 months.
You could have sat there the whole 4 months and just sat and fretted about it. Never did anything good about it, and we would have never met.
That's exactly it.
Right there, and that's like you couldn't get more. Here is the example par excellence, if you want to say.
I think also one thing that I want to make very clear, and it's also mentioned in the book, and we talk about this a lot, is that the don't fear, don't fret. Where does it come from? If I did the first 3 principles well, in other words, I'm challenging my, the way I'm thinking. I'm getting clear with who I am. I'm setting up my goals. It gives me the confidence to say, what am I afraid of? If I know what I want, if I know what I'm looking for.
If I know the direction I'm really heading overall.
Which brings us to the next, principle, which we're going to talk about, next time. The next principle is that idea of keep on pushing. The fearing and the fretting is going to also act as a fuel to give me that push to continue going. So remember that the fear is what shuts us down. The fear is what robs us from everything that we want. But there's nothing to fear because, I know I'm challenging the way I'm thinking. I know that I know how clear I am on what I want. I know the goals. I know the steps.
And I know that I can be flexible within that.
And then I know I can be flexible.
Flexibility is what allows us to not get stuck in the fear.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good.
So that's all I have for you today.
So basically, don't fear, don't fret, don't get yourself stuck in a victim mode. And then we move on.
Then we move on to the keep pushing on, trying everything, showing up.
So all I can think of the next one is just keep swimming. What do we do?
Keep pushing. So we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks again for showing up.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.